Well, I saw his film, and I was really impressed. That's why we carry it on the online video bookstore at Infowars.com. In fact, if you go to Infowars.com and look in the show guest area, we have a hyperlink to the film. It's Generation RX. Generation RX. And it goes over the history of the drugging of the children and adults and the horror stories. KevinP.Miller began producing documentaries in the 1980s and was immediately rewarded with numerous international film and television awards for his efforts. His first documentary, The Promised Land, explored the abandonment of homeless military veterans, and it won him many international film awards and other accolades. More importantly, it helped launch a string of hard-hitting documentaries about healthcare and other important issues over a 20-year period. KevinP.Miller is being featured in the upcoming book, Dangerous Men, along with David Icke, Dr. Bruce Lipton, and others. His latest film is called Generation RX, a documentary that examines how we are drugging our children earlier and more often than ever before with psychiatric medicines. It has been hailed by 2 Academy Award winner Paul Higgins as powerful and often chilling eye-opener. Hope I'm pronouncing that. Paul Haggis, I think I'm pronouncing that right, Mr. Miller?
It is. It's Paul Haggis.
Fantastic. Listen, so much to go over, so much to cover here. But whenever I look into the drugging of children and the New Freedom Initiative with its own internal documents saying the goal is to put 50% of America's kids on psychotropics and antipsychotics, these drugs brain damage people. They admit it causes suicide and psychopathic outbursts, especially in people that are already prone to impulse control. They know what they're doing, and as society breaks down, and now they have drugs for the drugs. I've seen those ads on television. So this is a bottomless pit, it seems, and the public is pretty much unaware of it. So I appreciate you making this film.
Well, listen, it's a great honor to be on your show, and I know that you've been covering the topic for a long time. And, when you talk about experimentation, that's already being done, of course, and the foster kids who are already in the worst situation imaginable without parents, they're being shifted around from house to house and institution to institution. And in California, Massachusetts, many states around the country, Florida, for one, over 75% of the foster kids are already on antipsychotic medications, Alex. So, it doesn't get much uglier than that, frankly.
Continue.
Well, I think that the reality is that when you've got 75% of the most vulnerable kids on antipsychotic medications, you know that there's some kind of trial going on. They're dumbing down people. And frankly, this is what we're putting another, 10 million or so kids who are diagnosed as, quote, bipolar disorder. That's the exact class of drugs that kids are being put on. And so, it's really an ugly thing, and it's only made uglier by the fact that our tax dollars are supporting it. In Florida, for example, that 75% of the foster kids that I was mentioning to you, I think it's 55 to 58% of those are being paid for by Medicare. So it's a ridiculous, heinous situation.
Now, when you talk about 75% in some states, the national average, at least when I made Endgame 2 years ago, was 69% of the nation's foster children are on psychotropics. And you're right that even then, I saw the number of 80%, approaching 80%, being on the drugs in some states. And they did a study in Texas, and we even have some committee hearing clips in Endgame, where the state psychiatrist says, well, it's eugenics. They have bad gene pools, is why we're putting upwards of 70% in the case of Texas on them. But as you said, some states even higher. Just let that sink in for the listeners out there. 75% of foster children on psychotropics and antipsychotics, but don't stop there. The Texas report from WOAI-TV in San Antonio, itself from the state's own numbers, said they're on an average of 7 drugs. And there were medical doctors on the TV program that we play clips of here saying they would see a healthy kid at, say, 3 years old that got grabbed by foster parents, by the system. And they'd see him 5 years later in a wheelchair, totally retarded, not even able to speak. So they are murdering these children with the drugs.
And you're talking about what conventional journalists are reporting, Alex, and so that makes it even more shocking because we know that there's this one hand feeds the other kind of attitude in the mainstream media. I mean, one of the guys in my film, Robert Whitaker, a former science journalist who basically is, he's almost blackballed. He almost can't find a job in conventional journalism anymore because he co-wrote a series on psychiatric research for the Boston Globe. And part of what he told me in the interview was that it's literally 1 out of every 70 children in the United States who are on antipsychotic medications alone. Of course, the number is higher if you include Ritalin and antidepressants and the like. So this is not a lark. This isn't a fluke. This is something, as you say, that the medical doctors and the medical establishment sure as hell know what they're doing, and it's been going on now pretty ardently since about 1970.
Yeah, this is THX1138. This is Brave New World, and Aldous Huxley in 62, shortly before his death at Berkeley, and folks can watch the film and the audio online, just Google Aldous Huxley Berkeley speech. He says that, hey, everything in my book is what the eugenic social planners were planning in 1930. And so everything I'm saying in the book is going to come true. After 2000 is our plan. And by the way, my brother runs the United Nations UNESCO program as the Secretary General of UNESCO. These people mean business, and they've now done it. I'm sure you saw the New Freedom Initiative that came out 4 years ago when the documents got leaked, where they want to force at least half the kids in the next phase on drugs, and then after that, everyone on drugs. I mean, this is really happening.
Well, I think that the timing of Generation RX is really extraordinary because it was rolled out just around the same time that, again, our friends, our cohorts in the mainstream media, New York Times and LA Times and Washington Post were starting to reveal for the very first time that, oh my God, there's actually a collusion going on. There's conflicts of interest. There's payola going on, especially when it comes to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders, the so-called Bible for mental disorders.
Yeah, I found out that the school nurses get weird kickbacks in payola, and so they push it on the kids and say, oh, here's a psychologist, here's a card. They're just like drug pushers, but they're not out on the playground selling the kids crack. They're doing it in the school, and they'll send the cops if you don't take it.
Well, what's funny is that we say in the film, I think it's Dr. Julian Whitaker, my good friend, the medical doctor from Los Angeles, and he says, it's comical because the very same drugs that they will arrest you for if you're walking down the street in front of a school are what the kids in the schools themselves are lining up to get from those very nurses. So, you're exactly correct, and this is not a surprise, nor is it a secret. I mean, each kid gets $400 to $500 for the school itself and for the school district if they are on these drugs because they are classified in a certain kind of a way that gets government dollars.
Special needs. And now some schools, a third or more of the school's special needs, and soon it's going to be half. And then just like THX1138, pretty soon kids in wheelchairs with nozzles into their nose and drug injectors. I mean, it's so nightmarish, the soft kill they're running. And then they say it's for eugenics in the state of Texas. They say they're giving us racial hygiene. Start with the film. Tell us about the film, because I really want people to get this on DVD at Infowars.com. I want them to have viewing parties, show it to local community groups, school boards. We've got to get Generation RX out to people.
Well, thank you, Alex. The film really came as a result of, in 2004, I was filming in Washington, something completely unintended. Ended up at a Food and Drug Administration hearing where they were a bunch of people who were standing before the FDA committee talking about the side effects of Prozac. And as I was filming over the 2-hour period or whatever, it kicked into me that, my God, I've heard this all before. And it turns out that I had originally heard it in a videotape from 1991, where the American citizens, 40, 50, 60 of them, were standing before the FDA a year after Prozac had been on the market, saying, my mother stabbed my father, my sister hung herself, every imaginable, awful, frightening story that you can imagine. And so when I realized that nothing had changed in that period of time, in fact, it had gotten worse and more kids had gotten on these medications, I said, nothing's changing. I need to produce a film about this. And so I got started on that path and really, uncovered all of the collusion.